When I was 10, I used to play with a hand-me-down action. I'd strip it to the waist and put it in my mouth, which at the age of 5 is worrying. At the age of 10, it means your ma has settled into the idea that you're different. It was around then that she told me. She knelt down on the brown swirly carpet, put herself at my height, and said,
Kevin, Mrs. Gingrey has told me you're having some problems at school. Do you want to tell me about it?
Ma was always saying how she didn't need me to be any more trouble. Not the usual sort of trouble. I set fire to things. Bins, benches. The school cat was accidental. I didn't play well with others, but I've recently found that no one at all used the disabled cubicle, and there was a panel at the back by the basin where I'd hidden a stash of comics. No one even checked it at break time. Mrs. Gingrey thought she was doing me a favour when she told Ma what the boys had shouted at me at school. But Ma didn't need me to be more difficult. I shook my head. She took the action man out of my mouth. She said,
Okay, Kevin. I've got a secret, but you can't tell anyone, okay? When the boys at school tease you, I just want you to know the truth and ignore them. Promise?
I tapped 3 fingers on my chest like I'd done in Cubs before.
Now, the reason your dad isn't around is because your dad...
A nurse's uniform brushed against my ear.
...is Doctor Who.
Wisest man on television. The man who wins through cleverness, not through punching you in the arm. The mysterious alien genius. I was half mysterious alien genius. I was going to fight Cybermen. I was going to stare at the burnt orange sky of Gallifrey. I was going to get Dad to take me right back to the very beginning and watch the Big Bang. Biggest explosion ever. Of course, he could have been any of the incarnations. Time travel, obviously. I hoped it was Tom Baker. 2 weeks later, I asked Ma to knit me a really, really long scarf. I wore it to school. I remember the grin I had on my face when Jamie said, "Who wears a scarf that's longer than them?" I started to not hide in the disabled cubicle at break time. I went out and played football, and I was awful. I actually missed a stationary ball, but when they made me stand against the fence while they kicked a ball at me, it didn't matter, because my dad was Doctor Who. I asked a girl, Henrietta. I liked her because she was the only girl in the year shorter than I was. She was way out of my league. I mean, she was one of the cool kids, and I hid in the disabled cubicles and set fire to cats. But I thought if it all went wrong, I could get Dad to take me back in time, and I'd undo it. Het, I was wondering if you'd like to come see my special place? It went wrong. She made this face. No! But the point was, I could still travel back in time with Dad and stop my red, stinging cheeks. I waited a month, and then another. To begin with, I didn't care about Jamie's, "Oi, Kevin, why don't you point to your special place?" But then, as I was daydreaming of Silurians, Mr. Fitzwilliam, the geography teacher, who was actually a PE teacher but the school was short-staffed, said, "Why don't we see what special place boy thinks?" I threw a chair at him. It didn't actually hit him. It clattered to a stop near his feet, but I was still suspended. Again. My dad take time off for saving the universe. I put this to Ma, but she was still angry at me for making her take time off while the red wine swirled around in a glass. She said,
Your father is a useless shite.
I started to hate Doctor Who. I went through a phase where after I'd watched every video, I'd take it apart and cut it into tiny little pieces before feeding it to a pigeon. He didn't mention me once. And then, in 2005, 10 years later, he came back as a northerner. I just hoped, prayed that that wasn't my dad. As if I hadn't suffered enough. I'd grown up. Less fire, more white lightning. I made myself watch it. Every single one. Of course, you've got time for Rose, don't you, Dad? Rose, you'll cross a parallel dimension for. Rose, you'll clone yourself in human form, won't you, Dad? But for me, you won't even travel up to M1 to Milton Keynes. That should have been me in the TARDIS. I even watched all the ones with Catherine Tate. And her mouth. In an episode about the flipping Olympics, the doctor says, I was a dad once. Still are, Dad. I'm right here. 50 years of the show and not even one mention. So I'm not even canonical. I became a health and safety officer. I've got 2 children who I see all the time. They offered me a job where I travel around the country and stop danger before it even started. I turned it down. And then when my eldest, Susan, asked me the other day whether she had a granddad,